Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Deep 404. I'm going to do a little bit of a report on update in Ukraine, what's happened in the last 24 hours. I'll go through the Russian Ministry of Defence's weekly summary for what's happened on the Ukrainian battlefront in the last week. I might just start here with a little bit of video of Avdeevka and of the onslaught it is under at the moment. The Ukrainian forces are suffering as the Russians look to take this, as they look to take Avdeevka here. Incendiary shelling of the town of Avdeevka. As you can see, this is very intense, extending over a large range, making it difficult for the Ukrainians to operate, obviously, while this is happening. Also, that destroys any sort of flammable cover that the Ukrainians may have in that area. Also, if you're unfortunate enough for that to contact you, of course, terrible burns ensuing. So Avdeevka is being pressured very strongly by the Russians. They are encircling, not only encircling from the north, coming down from the northeast and up from the southwest, but also pushing up into the south. The Russians have captured the heights of the coke plant dumping area, which gives them highland view, and the access to the heights overlooking Avdeevka. There's a bad news coming from the US. There's a change in the phraseology being used. John Kirby, who is the coordinator for strategic communications at the National Security Council in the White House, is now talking about how the US will continue to help Ukraine as much as we can, but this help will not be endless, which is a change from we will do what it takes, we'll stay here as long as it takes. Now, well, it's getting a bit tough. Israel might be starting to draw some of our attention, and Israel's probably more important to us than Ukraine is. So now it's, we'll help as much as we can. So this is problematic for the Ukrainian military, for Zelensky. Zelensky has been requesting an invite to Ukraine to Israel, so that he can remain relevant in the Western press and media. As you can imagine, if you have looked at the Western media, if you have looked at even social media, even Russian and Ukrainian social media channels over the last couple of days, the news focus has certainly moved from Ukraine to Israel. This has always been a concern for Zelensky, President Zelensky, that if some other conflict were to kick off that involved the Americans, that their focus and attention would shift. And that certainly seems to be happening now and is being demonstrated by the language coming from Kirby. More sort of bad news. Poland elections this weekend. It looks like the Confederation Liberty and Independence Party may have an opportunity of getting into power with the current Law and Justice Party under a coalition arrangement. Both of these parties really oppose further aid to Ukraine. Already Poland have come out and said that they're not going to be providing any more material support to Ukraine. They feel that they're tired of the Ukrainian conflict. They reportedly, this is some reporting coming out, is that they are not appreciating the Ukrainian refugees who have moved from Ukraine to Poland, and that under the UN rules of having to accept having less ability to choose which refugees they accept into Poland, that Poland is growing tired of that, and that they believe that the influx of refugees and Ukrainian refugees to Poland is threatening their local population. They don't express how it's threatening them, but that's just the sentiment which is coming from some of the Polish population leading up to the elections this weekend. So we're seeing a weakening in Western support for Ukraine, and now a draw away from Ukraine to Israel. There's also still the Ukrainians, having challenges with their mobilization. The Ukrainian Deputy Minister for Defense, Kalmakova, has reported that unfortunately there are a lot of people, this is measured in hundreds of thousands, who create conditions for themselves to avoid mobilization. Changes to regulations are being prepared that will help resolve this issue. So even if a person is not on the register of persons liable for military service, the Ukrainian state will be able to find them in other registers using an electronic trace. So it seems as though the Ukrainians are, and we know that they are, looking to expand very widely the net for people that will be mobilized or drafted. Ukraine is struggling to get volunteers to the fight. There are reported, increasingly, reports of surrenders and desertations from the Ukrainian armed forces. And this is due to many reasons. Many of the experienced commanders in the Ukrainian armed forces have now been killed or wounded. There are reports of young, untrained, inexperienced commanders incapable of properly controlling armed forces in the heat of battle. Reports from Russian sources that the Ukrainians are just continually resupplying troops. They're just pouring Ukrainian men into the conflict. They are being killed and wounded. They've been wounded and left on the battlefield. There's a lot of video evidence of this out there at the moment, where just this morning I saw footage of a Russian artillery strike on a group of about 6 or 7 Ukrainians. There were 1 or 2, probably 100 meters in front of them, heading in one direction. Then a group of 5 came through. They were hit by a direct shell strike. There were 2 or 3 behind them, and they just continued on and ran past them. There was no time for them to stop, to be concerned. Perhaps they could tell that they were all killed, and there was nothing that they could do. But certainly there are many reports of this type of thing, of Ukrainian forces being wounded and not being able to be evacuated, and therefore dying from wounds which they would have otherwise survived had they been able to receive medical attention. So young men being forced into the Ukrainian armed forces do not want to do this. They have young commanders who are not capable of commanding with experience, also not capable of commanding the older men who are being mobilized now. It's much easier to control and command young men, 16 to 24-year-olds, who themselves are young and experienced, have an older commander, father figure to command them to do things. If you flip that around, you've got a whole bunch of older men who really don't want to be in this fight. Very difficult to get them to do what you want them to do, particularly if you're a young, inexperienced commander. So problems there as well. There is reports that a underwater gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia, the Baltic Connector, has experienced a strange drop in pressure. What appears to be the thinking at the moment is that sabotage has occurred to this pipeline. The president of Finland has said that the gas pipeline was damaged as a result of external influence, although it appears they're being very cautious with what they're saying at this stage. This apparently has played a role in gas prices in Europe jumping to $534 per 1,000 cubic meters. So the Baltic connector, connecting the gas transmission networks of Estonia and Finland, is a key element of the regional gas market, and it is expected a press conference will be happening about this later today. So again, energy challenges with the European nations if they are now losing access to gas with a winter approaching. This becomes very tough, and this adds pressure to the population, and that flows on to governments who are seen to be supporting a war against Russia, which is leading to these energy price hikes. The coming months, we will see, I think, even more and more dissent from the European nations, and the support for Ukraine will drop. And we will subsequently see, as we've mentioned before, the Russian forces rolling westward, rolling to the Dnieper, rolling to Odessa, rolling to Kiev, is ultimately what I think we will see here. Again, just doing the numbers, the size of the Russian army, the confirmed numbers of volunteers, 350,000 of them this year have signed up. Reports now of new Russian forces getting in and supporting along the Russian lines. The advances that we're seeing in a number of areas, particularly Avdeevka, but north in Kupiansk, even in Zaporozhye, around Pyatikhatki area. These tactical advances, the reports that the Ukrainians have not taken the opportunity to defensively reinforce their positions to the levels they should have, as that would have meant a drawing away from the offensive and the battles for Bakhmut. Now that's going to leave them in a weakened position, and so when the Russians begin to intensify their push, we can expect that Ukrainian forces will struggle to hold their positions and that the Russians will roll forward. Again, if we've got European governments like Poland saying we're not providing any more aid to Ukraine, Ukraine is only able to continue in this fight because of the Western aid that it receives. Without that Western aid, it is unable to produce its own weapons. Its military has been destroyed. As we said, the average age of the Ukrainian forces now is well over 40. A year ago, that average age was 27. And that's not as has been suggested by some former British politicians, that Zelensky is trying to husband and protect the youth of the nation. It's because the youth of the nation have already been chewed up by this conflict, killed and wounded, and they are now forced to draft older men into the Ukrainian armed forces. So all of this looking more and more likely that we will see a Russian grinding offensive over the coming months that will push and push and push until a point that Russia is happy and satisfied that it has achieved the goals of its special military operation, being the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, and it will be regime change within Ukraine to ensure that what remains of Ukraine will remain neutral and will not join NATO. I'll move on to now a little bit of a summary, just a couple of different reports, more from the field of what's happened over the last few days, and then I'll go through the Russian Ministry of Defense's weekly update. So this is from Rybar, a Russian-Ukrainian channel. They do provide quite good and consistent, reliable reporting. They say The Russian armed forces attacked enemy targets at night in Kharkiv, Kherson region, Izmail, Odessa region, Ochakov, Nikolaev region, Uman, and the Cherkasky region. The offensive of the Russian armed forces continues in the Avdeevka region. By the evening, reports were received that south of Avdeevka, a section of the railway south of the former Tsarskaya Okhta recreational centre, which the Ukrainian armed forces had turned into a fortified area before the war, had been taken under Russian control. Fights are taking place near the village. Berdichi, in the village Stepovoy, a waste heap is occupied near the northwestern outskirts of Avdiivka. There were heavy, bloody battles all day, and our artillery and aviation are working hard in the morning. One thing that I will also note that has happened, there have been a number of reports of Russian losses of armoured equipment in the last 2 days. I don't think that you should read into this that the Ukrainians are suddenly having success. I think what we're seeing here is that there is a massive armoured offensive beginning by the Russians, and as such they are suffering losses to Ukrainian artillery because there has been such an increase in the number of pieces of Russian armour advancing in the last couple of days. So that uptick in those numbers, I think, is to be expected. But what we are seeing, which is different to the Ukrainian offensive, is that we are getting lots of reports of Russian successes, Russian advances, Russian recapture of positions previously held by Ukrainians. And yes, they are suffering some losses in equipment, but different to what we saw with Ukraine, which was where we saw that there were lots of attempted advances, but very little ground captured and very, very heavy losses. So the Rybar summary goes on. On the Zaporozhye front, the Russian armed forces continue to destroy the Ukrainians, who are sent forward in small groups of infantry. Our cannon and rocket artillery and heavy flamethrower systems are working. There is some footage that has come out of some of the heavy flamethrower, the TOS-1 systems in operation today. Again, frightening to imagine being anywhere near where these these warheads are landing. In the Kherson direction, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to prepare for offensive actions across the Dnieper. This has been going on for some weeks, even a month or 6 weeks now. Pontoon crossings to the northeast of the region are being pulled up. However, the Ukrainian group allocated for the offensive numbers about 12,000 people, which is significantly less than the number of personnel in the Russian armed forces on our bank of the Dnieper. So the Russians have been responding, it seems, to the reports that the Ukrainians are amassing forces in Kherson. We have seen a slow and steady uptick in the reported Ukrainian casualties in the Kherson region, moving from what was like 15, maybe 20 a day, up to the 50 a day now. And active reports over the last few weeks of attempts by the Ukrainians to establish means of getting across the islands. However, Rybar go on, the threat of the Ukrainian armed forces carrying out a large-scale crossing of the Dnieper remains high, despite the simultaneous conduct of a radio game in order to misinform the Russian command. South of Artyomsk, the armed forces of Ukraine attempted to attack our positions in Ozary-Anivka, which is located near Kurdyamovka, but the attempt was stopped by artillery fire. At night, on the outskirts of Belgorod, now Belgorod is within Russia itself, a Ukrainian armed forces UAV destroyed 2 residential buildings. 3 people died, including a small child. 2 civilians are in intensive care. During the day, the Ukrainian armed forces shelled the village. Dronovka, Voronsky urban district settlement of Gravovka, Valovsky urban district, a downed UAV detonated. In the Bryansk region, again, this is a region within Russia, the Ukrainian armed forces shelled Suzemka twice, wounding 4 civilians. And 2 UAVs shot down on approach to Bryansk over the Surazhsky district. By nightfall, Sevastopol channels wrote about the destruction of targets over the Black Sea far from the city. So incoming Ukrainian drones or missiles headed towards Sevastopol and Crimea, reportedly having been shot down over the Black Sea. In the Donetsk People's Republic, the Ukrainians fired 36 rounds or shells and a civilian was wounded. So there are continued reports of Ukrainian shelling of Donetsk city and civilian areas there. In the Avdeevka direction, the Russian armed forces continue heavy operations. Heavy fighting is taking place near Berdichi and Stepovoy. From the waste heap occupied the day before on the northwestern outskirts of Avdeevka, reconnaissance and adjustment of artillery and aviation fire are being carried out on Ukrainian positions in the city centre. In the south of the Avdeevka fortified area, battles near Opotnoy and the railway. The situation is being clarified and the weak points in the enemy's defence are being identified. The Ukrainian armed forces blew up the bridge between Golovka and Yasin of Vataya, increasing the logistics leverage of the Russian army. The Ukrainians are transferring reserves to the Avdeevka direction. In the Kherson direction, our aviation is actively using FAB 1500 against Ukrainian positions. The targets become accumulations of enemy manpower and equipment. At night, further attacks are reported. On the Zaporozhye front, the armed forces of Ukraine do not stop attacks on the Robotno-Verbovoye line. Yesterday, near Verbovo, an attempt by enemy infantry to break through was again thwarted. The Russian armed forces are holding defences south of Artyomsk or Bakhmut. The Klesheyevka-Andriivka section still remains one of the most difficult. There are battles for positions near the railway. We've talked about this before. There's the railway running up from the south of Bakhmut into Bakhmut, and from Andriivka and Klesheyevka, the Ukrainians are trying to push up from the southwest towards that railway line. That railway line gives them some elevation, some cover, and also some underground protection. The Russians have been using this, and we've shown this on the map before in Andriivka. The fortified concrete underground railway bunker, I guess, is what you would refer to it as. In the Svatovo-Kremenaya direction, the 25th Combined Arms Army, recently brought into battle, is leading a creeping offensive. In the Bryansk region, the Azarovka and Demyanki regions of the Starodub municipal district were shelled on the outskirts of Bryansk. Electronic warfare was suppressed by an aircraft-type UAV, which detonated when falling. In the Belgorod region, an enemy UAV was shot down in the Yakovlevsky urban district, and in Donetsk, civilians were killed and injured from Ukrainian armed forces artillery fire. So that's some reporting from Robar about what's happening. Now I will get on to the Ministry of Defence and their weekly summary report. I'll just get a map here so we can go through our map. Okay. So this reporting from the Russian Ministry of Defence, as I've said many times, I report on this because it is a consistent form of information we receive. It comes out each day with weekly summaries. While you take this information with the skepticism that you feel it deserves. While these numbers may or may not be entirely accurate, they are at least consistent and they seem to indicate trends. We don't see wide deviations in the numbers here. When we do see changes in the numbers reported here, it seems to align with other reporting that you can pick up from Telegram channels. Excuse me just a moment. And so for that reason, I do report on this. And as I've said before, you can often find footage, verified geolocated footage that will corroborate what is being reported by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Finally, the numbers of reported Ukrainian killed and wounded. The Ministry of Defense has explained that they gather these numbers not by estimations or by looking at videos, but by intercepts of Ukrainian communications. That's how they were able to obtain these numbers. Anyhow, I'll get onto this. In the period from the 7th to the 13th of October 2023, the armed forces of the Russian Federation carried out 8 group strikes by Iskander-M operational tactical system and unmanned aerial vehicles. The strikes hit 1 warehouse of missiles, artillery weapons and military equipment, production workshops of enterprises manufacturing weapons and military equipment, as well as accommodation points for Ukrainian servicemen, nationalists and foreign mercenaries. As a result of the strikes, storage facilities for US-made Willard motorboats, 1 field artillery depot of Kherson, 1 hardware depot at the Duan-Syuda-Service ship repair plant close to Lishevsk in the Odessa region, and a fuel and lubricant storage base at the Uman airfield in the Cherkasky region were destroyed. In the Kupiansk direction, where units of the Zapad group of forces operating. So Kupiansk direction on our map is this area right here at the top of this orange line on the northeastern front. The Zapad group of forces operating in this area and have been utilising army aviation and artillery have captured more favourable positions. 46 AFU means Armed Forces of Ukraine, 46 AFU attacks were repelled close to Ivanovka, Sinkovka in the Kharkov region, and Makiivka in the Lugansk People's Republic. So this is Makiivka here, this is Sinkovka here. So they're talking about activity along a front of roughly 65 kilometres along there down to Makiivka. So 46 attacks reported in the week, Ukrainian attacks reported in that 65 kilometre front. In addition, the AFU's 25th Airborne, 14th and 92nd Mechanised Brigades, manpower and hardware have been hit close to Sinkovka, Timkovka in the Kharkov region, and Novosibirsk in the Lugansk People's Republic. The enemy losses, so when this reporting says enemy, this is a Russian report, so this is referring to the Ukrainians, and I'll often read it as it's written. The enemy losses were more than 830 AFU servicemen killed and wounded, 3 tanks, 4 armoured fighting vehicles, 19 motor vehicles, and 17 artillery guns. 2 missile artillery ammunition depots of foreign mercenaries and the 1st Special Operations Brigade were destroyed near Volchansk and Ugutsovo in the Kharkov region. In Krasny Liman, we're moving down to the bottom of this red line and towards this blue area here. Krasny Liman area and Seversk around here. In the Krasny Liman direction, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, using their 5th National Guard, their 63rd and 67th Mechanised Brigades, made unsuccessful attempts to regain lost positions near Chervonaya Dibrova in the Lugansk People's Republic and Yampalovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. As a result of the actions of the Center Group of Forces, which are the Russian forces who operate in this area, Their use of artillery fire and heavy flamethrowers, the TOS-1 thermobaric systems. 22 enemy attacks were repelled in this week-long period. The enemy losses were more than 895 servicemen, 4 tanks, 11 armoured fighting vehicles, 19 guns, as well as 1 Czech-made Vampire MLRS, multiple launch rocket system. In the Donetsk direction, so now moving to Donetsk, this is Bakhmut here, or Archomsk up at the top, and then moving down to Donetsk city down here at the bottom. And our Avdeevka, the fighting is in this area here just north of Donetsk. In Donetsk direction, this is where the Yug group of forces of the Russian army are operating. In cooperation with aviation and artillery, repelled 17 attacks by Ukrainian armed forces near Vasilyevka and Vodyanoy in the Donetsk People's Republic. Over the week, the Ukrainians have lost more than 1,580 servicemen killed and wounded. That's 1,580 in this Donetsk area in the last week. 4 tanks, 30 armoured fighting vehicles, 22 motor vehicles, 14 field artillery guns, as well as 1 Grad MLRS. In addition, 2 AFU sabotage and reconnaissance groups and 5 field ammunition depots were eliminated. Now in the South Donetsk region, here we're talking from Marinka, Staromayorsk, Urozhaina, Priotny, sort of through this area. In the South Donetsk region, due to the actions of Russian units, they have improved the situation along the front line and repelled 8 AFU attacks. 3 AFU sabotage and reconnaissance groups have been disabled. Over the week, the Ukrainians have lost more than 1,285 killed and wounded in the South Donetsk area. 10 armoured fighting vehicles, 22 motor vehicles, 14 field artillery guns, as well as 1 Grad MLRS have been destroyed. Moving now to the Zaporozhye region. Here, Khatki over here on the west, and Robotne, Verbove here, Malatokmacha just here. In Zaporozhye direction, 4 attacks of assault groups of the AFU's 65th Mechanized 71st Jaeger Brigades were repelled by intensive actions of the Russian units, airstrikes and artillery fire near Verbova and Rabotino in the Zaporozhye region. The enemy losses were more than 385 servicemen, 3 tanks, 9 armoured fighting vehicles and 14 motor vehicles and 14 field artillery guns. Moving then down to Kherson, the Kherson region here. The Kherson region is where we may expect to see some Ukrainian offensive in the coming days, as has been reported. The Russians believe there's a force of 12,000 Ukrainians attempting to prepare for an assault over the Dnieper River to attack the Russians in this area. The Russians reporting they now have amassed a larger number of troops than that in this area. So we'll see what happens here. In Kherson direction, the Ukrainian units made unsuccessful attempts to capture bridgeheads on the islands and the left bank of the Dnieper. Over the week, more than 325 Ukrainians have been killed or wounded in the Kherson direction. 9 field artillery guns, 1 Grad MLRS, and 53 motor vehicles have been eliminated. In addition, 3 ammunition depots and 2 sabotage and reconnaissance groups were eliminated on Alyoshkinsky and Peryaslavsky Islands. Fighter aviation of the Russian Aerospace Forces shot down 1 Su-25 ground attack aircraft of the Ukrainian Air Force close to Priobalzhenka in the Zaporozhye region. Operational tactical and army aviation, missile troops and artillery destroyed 1 Su-25 ground attack aircraft at Dolgen Dolgantsevo airfield in the Dnepropetrovsk region. One Tochka U missile system launcher near Pereshnoy in the Kharkov region. One S-300 SAM system close to Nikolaev, as well as two ST-68U radar stations for the detection, identification and tracking of aerial targets near Malovarovka in the Nikolaev region. We have had reports of more air defense systems being sent down to Odessa of recent. It sounds as though some of those systems are now being picked off by the Russians. In addition, air-delivered ordnance depots were destroyed near Dubievka in the Cherkasy region and Pryuki in the Chernigov region, as well as fuel depots at airfields in Ozernoye and Zhytomyr and the Mirgorod in the Poltava region. The Black Seas Fleet naval aircraft destroyed one AFU uncrewed surface vehicle in the Black Sea waters. So that's the weekly summary for what has happened in Ukraine. As I say, what we're seeing here is the increase in Russian tactical advances. We are seeing a loading on of Russian pressure and force along the line. We are seeing Ukrainians losing positions and the Russians gaining those positions and holding them and seemingly continue to then advance again. The Avdeevka settlement is one which, if it does fall to the Russians, will be a major blow to the Ukrainian morale and offensive. Avdeevka reportedly is the most reinforced area of the Ukrainian defensive line. It has been reinforced heavily with concrete bunkers and fortifications since 2014. Hence the massive artillery, rocket, bomb, missile strikes the Russians have been enacting on Avdeevka over the last couple of days in an attempt to soften it, an attempt to disable and destroy the bunkers that the Ukrainians have there, so that the Russian ground forces can move in and assume control of the area there. Already they are having successes, having picked up the high grounds near the coke plant, which is now giving them the ability to target their artillery more precisely by using that vantage point of the heights. Look, I'll leave it there for today. I'll try to get another report in tomorrow, as I think over the next day or so we will start to see some activity in the Kherson region, and we will see more activity in Israel. Look, I hope you're having a good weekend and you're enjoying the reports. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.